we've been putting a lot of work into this, and when we see it goes well, then I get all giddy and I stutter a little bit. So if I do that, then please excuse it. So how many of you guys live in Deep Ellum? Show of hands. Okay. How many of you live in other parts of 108? All right. And how many of you do not live in 108, but you know people who do, and you'll spread the word? Okay. So we've got a good variety. And how many of you have still not been to Texas? Okay, I just wanted to see how you were listening. So you are. That's great. So House District 108 is Deep Ellum, downtown Dallas, uptown Lakewood, part of Oak Lawn. It's an interestingly drawn district, but that is kind of the gist of it. I'm sorry? The Village. Thank you. No, what's that? Lower Greenville. Okay, so I don't mean to snub anybody, but if you look it up, you'll see it. Okay. So, the reason why I volunteer my time to these efforts is because it does really rankle me how many people do not regularly vote in state and local elections because they are so impactful. And when I ask people who do not regularly vote in these elections, why not, it's almost always because they feel like they just don't really know what's going on and they don't really get engagement. And I know being in Deep Ellum, the representative we currently have, the engagement is basically non-existent. And I've actually literally done research on finding a photo, an event link, or something to find evidence that Morgan Meyer has ever set foot in this district in the 6 years since he ran for the seat. I've come up with nothing. So it's time for change. So. And by you being here, you're sending a message that the neighborhood does need to be taken seriously and that there are parts of the district that should not be ignored any longer. So thank you once again. And I just want to mention that in 2018, out of 150 state house districts, we had the second highest turnout in the state. And yep, that's great. And largely thanks to organizations like the Feds bringing out the vote. Also, the incumbent clung onto a seat by only 220 votes. It was a razor thin margin, and I think we have more than 220 people in this room alone, so absolutely. But here's the thing. In order to do that, especially in a neighborhood like Deep Ellum where it is largely transient, people typically did not grow up in Deep Ellum as kids. We do have a charter school now, but that's a whole other thing. And when they do move here, typically it's because they're young and single and they want to party. And I'm not saying that I fit the bill when I moved here, but that is quite common. And so at the forefront of their minds is not, oh my gosh, I need to update my registration and get my address taken care of. And we do have vote registrars in the audience, and we have a table in the middle. It's a little hard to see with this lighting, but Miss Bianca, if you could stand up real quick, and it looks like you've got someone with you. So thank you very much. If you have any questions at all, any doubts, it's a little bit cumbersome. Like I think if you were in Dallas County before and just moved to a new address, you're okay. If you came from a different county, but I mean, it's just it's good to check up on, and Miss Bianca could do that. So thank you for stepping up. Okay, if you move, just look into it and assume that you need to do it. Yes, thank you. So February 3rd is the cutoff for registering to vote in this primary. That's 1 week from today. So it's very important that we get that taken care of because this race is very important. There are lots of races that are very important where we need to get a nominee. So. Sorry, this is my primitive teleprompter. Before we begin our program, I do want to introduce the venue, Deep Ellum Art Company. And how cool is this venue? Woo! It's a really neat venue, great layout, really captivating, cool people hang out here. So I want to encourage you to please spend at the bar, whether you drink, you only live once, and this is an exciting occasion. If you don't drink, they have all kinds of things that are non-alcoholic. I don't drink anymore, and I'm still spinning at the bar. They do have merchandise for sale, and they do have artwork for sale. So if you like art, then you're at the right place. Politics, art, like-minded people, good times, right? And so real quick, I do want to bring someone on stage. I want to welcome the creative director of this space, Ms. Amber Crimmings. Can you please tell us about the venue and what goes on here and what people can seek?
Hey, you guys, welcome. We're very grateful to have our community here. We're all about community in this venue. We work very hard to grow our local musicians and our artists outwards. I specialize in helping them inject business principles into what they do so they learn how to feed themselves. Please take a moment to walk the gallery wall. We have artists that are students, and then we also have artists that have upwards of 20,000 plus followers and fly all over the world, because creativity is not something that is always at a very high dollar price. So we work really hard on the strength of collaboration, much like a teacher does with their students. Your strong students will bring up your students that are struggling. So we operate much this way, not just with our visual arts, but with our music as well. We have a wide, varied schedule. We have Shakespeare in the Bar coming up on Thursday. So if you have never attended one of those events, I encourage you to. I'll also have a brand new show on the wall. That show is going to be called Passionate Beats, Thrumming with Passion, which is really tied in with everything that we do around here and everything really that encompasses this city. So thank you very much for being here. Super grateful. Please find me while you're out and about, and we can chat about arts and culture and how important that is to city development, politics, and who we are as humans.
And I do want to confirm what she was saying about not only do they offer the space to sell art, but they really do develop young artists. And I've been to events where they're so resourceful, and we really appreciate everything you do. And I do want to share a quick funny anecdote that resulted from organizing this debate. When I was talking to Amber about it, she said, I'm in Rockwall, and I've been on the Arts Commission for a couple of years, and it's just opened my eyes to a lot, and I've thought about running for office. And I knew her military background, her background as a teacher, as a mom, and how well-informed she is on all kinds of issues. And so I said, you must run for office. No, not that she had to, but we talked about it, and this was on the Saturday before the filing deadline, and on the following Monday on the deadline, she filed. All because of this event. So it just goes to show how that grassroots organizing can open the door to all kinds of other things. Can you just tell us what you're running for?
Oh, goodness, I almost fell over. I'm running for the office of tax assessor collector, which I think works really well in that area. It's less diversive. People are not as divided on issues when it comes to something like that. And being able to work to open up conversations is always something we should always strive for. So thank you guys very much. Social media, Facebook, Amber Crimmings. You can find me online. Please follow, and all that jazz.
And I know that there's never enough ask for money, but you can donate to her campaign as well. And do they just come up to you, and you've got PayPal and checks and online? So every penny counts. So thank you, Amber, and thank you for stepping up. All right. Well, I am your host, Ian Saint, and I do have some funky co-hosts, quite literally. The Funky East Dallas Democrats. Yeah, round of applause for that. Really amazing group led by really amazing women, and their leadership is all women. And I'm just always astounded by how effectively they organize and engage, and they get those high voter turnouts that are key to flipping seats. And they have a lot of great events that they put on. So I would just like to introduce one of them to talk about it. Give it up for Miss Christy Noble.
I can't handle it on the thing. Hey guys. How many people watched the impeachment fiasco today? Did you feel how the room just went? All right. So what are we going to do? We're going to vote, right? And we're going to get everybody that we know to vote, right? And we're going to turn Texas blue. Right, and it starts right here, this full crowd, this full venue. I'm so excited that all of you guys are here. I'm going to tell you first, who has not heard of the feds? Raise your hand. Oh, that's freaking awesome. Awesome. All right, so just real quick, what we are is we started after the election of 2016. Brandy Chambers coined it the Trumpocalypse, and I love that. And we got together and decided that we needed to increase voter turnout because in Texas, voter turnout was in the tank, okay? In East Dallas, we helped with a lot of other groups and a lot of other campaigns that worked in 2018. We increased voter turnout by over 4% in East Dallas. And if we could do that all across Dallas County, then Beto would have been our senator, okay? So that's why we've got to work hard and vote. I want to tell you about the next few events that we're having tomorrow night. We have an education talk on fair housing and equitable housing. It's at Times 10-2 in Lakewood. That's a huge issue right now in our city, and we have a really amazing expert who's going to talk to us about it and inform us so we can start doing something at our level, at our individual level, to make it a better place and have affordable housing in Dallas. The second thing that we're doing is this weekend we have what's called a lit stick party. What it is little sticky notes that says where and when to vote, and we're putting it on 20,000 Democrats' doors in East Dallas, because if we can get those people voting in the primary election, by God, you know they're going to vote in the November election, all right? So if you can walk and you can stick, come out to Halcyon at 10 o'clock Saturday morning, get about 50 or so sticky notes. We'll give you a list and we'll get a whole bunch out. We're going to be doing that this Saturday, and next Saturday we'll have another location, okay? It works. We've figured out it works. People are doing it all over the state now, okay? So it's easy. No knocking, no talking, just not licking, just sticking. Okay. All right. I have one small anecdote because Ian had one, so I have to have one. Okay, so we're here tonight because this is a super important House district. We know that there's 22, 24 all over Texas, and we need 9 to flip in our direction to take the Texas House back, right? Everybody know that? Okay, it's super, super important. Like Ian said, 212 votes away. We can do that here, all right? We've got 3 amazing candidates who want to represent us. All right? And they're out here, and we are here tonight to make each of them stronger, okay? To make each of them stronger. So whoever is our eventual nominee will be the strongest, the most informed, the best communicative, have the best stance on issues to go against Morgan Meyer, okay? That's what we're here for. So here's the story. I played college basketball, all right? And you know, I was young. I thought I was super cool, and we practiced every day, right? And the basketball story I have to tell because everyone knows why. Basketball's on everybody's mind this week, okay? And I played with 2 of my best friends. One's name was Carol Bailey Sessoms. One's name was Christy Ramos. They were both. I was actually a short person then, or comparatively. They were very, very tall, and every day in practice, we fought for position. We hit each other. I had bruises all over my face. I had bruises all over my chest. I pissed them off. They pissed me off. We called each other every name in the book. And why did we do that? To get better, to get stronger. We fought tooth and nail. We called each other, B. Yeah, we sure did. And then as soon as we stepped off the court, I was like, hey, where are you going to eat? Right? We were friends. We were tight because we were on the same team and we knew who the real enemy was. Yep. Does that make sense? So we're working hard. We're going to get stronger. The real enemy in this fight is Morgan Meyer. The real enemy are the Republicans in the Texas legislature. And the real enemy is getting Trump administration out. Starts right here. Thank you guys so much.
Give it up for Christy! Woo! And by the way, I forgot to mention, it's really important. The feds did provide the pizza, and I would really like for them to recoup the cost. So please make sure that you donate when you get your pizza, and you don't have to get pizza in order to donate. Just saying. So please take that into consideration. So we are going to get started very shortly. We do have a very quick interjection by a guy that some of you might have heard of before, as his name was in big block letters on a lot of lawns not too long ago. And actually, he has a big mural in the main junction of Deep Ellum still. So have you guys heard of a guy named Beto O'Rourke, perhaps? Awesome. So Beto actually would like to be here tonight, but he's in Fort Bend because there's a special election going on right now. I bet election results are probably getting tabulated as we speak. So he's been pounding the pavement really hard for Dr. Elise Markowitz, who we're all rooting for. But despite being really busy, he did still carve out time to record a message just for us, which is really cool. He knows the importance of 108 and how it'll be at the forefront of flipping control of the state legislature. So without further ado, via video, I would like to introduce Mr. Beto O'Rourke.
Greetings to everybody in Deep Ellum tonight, and thank you for holding this debate for HD108 and for committing yourselves to getting behind whoever the nominee is in HD108 to make sure that we win this and every seat that we possibly can to take a majority for the first time since 2001 in the Texas State House. We are working right now in Fort Bend County to make sure that Elise Markowitz wins the runoff to the special election that will allow her to become the first Democrat in modern history to ever represent Fort Bend in the state legislature, at least HD28. Here's what's at stake. Not only do we have a chance to win a majority, not only do we have a chance to stop the racist gerrymandering that has prevailed in Texas for as long as we've had a Republican majority in the state legislature in Texas, but we can move forward on the things that are truly important to us. If we want to reduce gun violence and pass gun laws that make sense, that most Texans can agree with, and that will save lives, we're going to need a majority. If we want to confront climate change before it's too late, we're going to need a majority. If we want to expand Medicaid in the least insured state in the United States of America, a state whose number one provider of mental health care services is its county jail system, we're going to need to win a majority. In fact, for anything that we want to do that's important to any single one of us, we need to win a majority. So what you are doing tonight, what we are doing with our organization, Powered by People, that brings the power of volunteers to bear on these state house races all over Texas, all of that is necessary if we are going to prevail in November, allow this state to step up and take a leading role in the direction and the future of this country, and to ensure that we can live up to our promise and to our potential. So thank you for what you are doing, and look forward to seeing you out on the campaign trail before long.
Woo!
How cool was that? Really good to hear from him. Many of you in the room I know through him, and so it's really cool that he's fitting us in despite all the craziness in Fort Bend. So let me get this screen up so that we can get the debate started. I was bracing for disaster, but that went pretty smoothly. So I will say, you know, in organizing this event and promoting it and overseeing all the moving parts, the one role I'm really glad I did not have to do is moderating. because if I had to be the moderator, I probably would have died because it's pretty stressful. But what does a man do if he's not cut out for a job? He seeks a better qualified woman to do it. And we have a fantastic woman who has stepped up to moderate. She is a Dallas County judge who has been on the bench for nearly a decade. She is renowned in pretty much every circle I've ever seen her in. The Dallas Morning News editorial board had this to say about her. She has the reputation within the legal community of running an efficient, fair, and decorous courtroom. She's clearly set high expectations for herself throughout her legal career and done the hard work to hit the mark again and again. In addition to her judicial duties, she's now running for a statewide judicial seat. She's running for a seat on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. So the fact that she agreed to do it, I was pleasantly surprised because it's pretty time-consuming to juggle all that. And if she does win, she will be the first Democrat to win statewide in like a quarter century. And she will be the first Asian American elected official in Texas history. And I want to welcome to the stage Judge Tina Yu Quinton. We have steps over there, but it's okay. All right. Judge, could you, for those who are not familiar with judicial elections, can you talk about how you came to become a judge and the seat that you're seeking?
So I started running in 2007 in Dallas County. The first race that I did was a 6-county race, and I did that because the Democratic Party needed to set a bar to see where we were. We finally took those intermediary courts in 2018 with a slate of 8. But after that, I ran for Dallas County race, and I became a judge in 2010 here in Dallas County. I got reelected in 2014. In 2018, I ran for a district court. I'm in that court now. Texas Criminal District Court number 1 is the oldest criminal district court in the state of Texas on its 126th year, and I'm honored to be the presiding judge of that court. Now, we have an opportunity to actually take not only the Supreme Court, but the Court of Criminal Appeals. So the Court of Criminal Appeals is your highest criminal court in the state of Texas. We handle the criminal matters. The Supreme Court handles everything else but the criminal matters. And so it's 9 Republicans up there, just like it is on the Supreme Court side. There hasn't been a Democrat in over 20 years there. And we have some tremendously problematic decisions that are coming out of that court. And so this is not my forum, but the feds are having another forum for judicial soon, so I invite you to come out to that. Yay. My one other judicial colleague out here, yes. And so I invite you to come and find out more about the judicial races. I tell you part of that to say, as a judicial candidate, I do not endorse. I do not take part in favoring one candidate over another. My job is to be impartial, so my job here is to be impartial. I know all 3 of the wonderful candidates that we have for you today, and I'm honored to be a small part of today's highlight of these candidates. And so my job is to do exactly what I do every day, which is make sure that information comes to you. You will be the jurors today. I will be the moderator, and the 3 individuals will be the ones that are highlighted. That is my job. I hope that I can do that. And just kind of know that when he let a judge create the questions, you already have a slight problem. So just kind of know that that's kind of the background of what happened. I'm honored to be here with you, and I hope that we can inform you. I hope that you get excited about these 3 individuals, because I am, and I hope that at the end of the primary, regardless of what happens, that we unite together as Democrats, and that in 2020, we watch and make that blue wave crest over Texas, because it's time.
Thank you very much. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the candidates to the stage. And when you get here, please stand because we will do a drawing for seating order. So in alphabetical order, I will introduce. Candidates, are you nearby, hopefully? Okay, great. All right, and we do have steps over here, so you don't have to risk your life getting on stage. And we have plenty of pizza still, so if you're hungry, please take part. And make sure that you do that donation too, please. So, in alphabetical order, I would like to introduce Joanna Cattanach, Tom Ervin, and Shawn Terry. Okay, so we just have to make a couple of adjustments, probably to the lighting and other matters. I do want to determine the seating order. And I have an online randomizer, so I'm going to pull it up right now. The tension, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It is, I know, it's a little intimidating. Online randomizer, okay. Okay, I'm typing in the names right now. Joanna, Tom. Okay, randomizer. 1, 2, 3, randomize. Okay, so first is going to be Joanna, second is going to be Shawn, and third is going to be Tom. If you could please take your seats. So the rules that we've imposed are that we're going to have 1 minute for opening statements. We do have an independent timekeeper who's going to be to your left here, Ms. Joey. Can you guys see?
Can you see this? 1 minute.
Do you need some light? Okay. Yes, so we're going to hold up time cards to warn you about 1 minute remaining, 30 seconds remaining, 15 seconds remaining, and when your time's up, she's going to yell. So please adhere to the time restrictions. We're going to have 1 minute for opening statements. Each question is going to allow 2 minutes per candidate. And then for closing statements, we will also do 1 minute. And I guess for opening statements, we'll do left to right, and we'll do reverse for closing, if that's all right. And the judge, as she said, did come up with questions on her own that she's going to ask. And then we will read a selection of written questions from the audience. So if you would like to ask a question, please go to the sign-in table near the door. I see a guy waving. And write your question down there, and with whatever time we have, we will ask those. And please be respectful and no heckling or circus antics, because I worked really hard to put this on, and if people derail my event with that kind of stuff, I'll probably cry. And I'm a really ugly crier, so you just don't want that. So, Judge, do you think we're ready to get started?
I think we're ready.
Okay, candidates, are you ready? Okay.
Thank you. Timekeeper, are you ready?
Ready.
Wonderful. Ms. Cattanach,
Yes.
your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be in front of you tonight. A big round of applause for the organizers of tonight's event one more time. Thank you all so much. I can't tell you how important it is to get people engaged in these state house races. We must flip the Texas state legislature. I'm excited tonight to talk again about the strength of our campaign and the wonderful work that we've been doing since 2018 to finally flip this state house seat. I look forward to your questions tonight, but more than anything, I hope that we can count on your door knocks. I hope that we can count on your volunteerism, and I hope that we can count on your win as we make it through the general and House District 108.
Mr. Terry.
First of all, I want to thank you, Judge Clinton, for agreeing to moderate this. I know you've got a busy life and schedule. Thank you, Ian, for planning this event, and of course the feds for bringing pizza and getting all of us here. Again, my name is Shawn Terry, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to introduce myself to you tonight. As many of you know, but many of you don't, I'm a dad, I'm a small business owner, I'm a proud Democrat, And I got in this race because it's as important as all of you believe it is, and that's why you're here tonight. Flipping the Texas House has an enormous impact on everyone's life, and so we want to put our best foot forward. But seeing this crowd, I think, is an incredibly encouraging sign about how much opportunity we have in Texas, how much energy our party has, and I think it sends a great signal to Mr. Meyer that his days in the legislature are numbered.
Mr. Ervin.
So I will echo those thanks, especially thanks to all of you for coming out on a wet, cold night. I am Tom Ervin. I've been a part of people-powered neighbor-to-neighbor campaigns to help elect Democrats for the past 3 years. But now I'm running to represent the values and the vision of people of this district in the Texas State House. You know, Dallas is my home. I've lived in this district for over 30 years. Before that, I'm the first in my family to attend and graduate college. I have a BS in geology and a minor in math. Here in Dallas, I received an MBA from SMU. I married Terry, and we bought a home in the M Streets, and I started a small business, all right here in this district. You know, I've been out there, and I know we all know that a strong public education and affordable health care are important to us, but I hear from the people that we need affordable housing, affordable child care, a speedy transition to green energy, and we need common sense gun reform that keep our families safe. So I welcome your questions tonight, and again, thanks for being here.
Again, as we start the questioning, we are going to start with Ms. Cattanach. Everyone will have 2 minutes. Please make sure that you see 2 minutes. 2 minutes, okay, got it. 2 minutes per question. And please make sure that you keep an eye on the timekeeper. All right. First question, Ms. Cattanach. What is your top legislative priority and why?
So I'm going to answer that twofold, because the top legislative priority for every single candidate in the Texas State Legislature has to be redistricting, because it will be the actual job of the legislature. You can't not have that a priority, because it is the one job everybody has to deal with, and I am supportive of a nonpartisan redistricting committee. Beyond that, we must have a substantive discussion about health care in the state of Texas. We have the most uninsured, and I know I'm preaching to a choir here who understands this, but it's important to keep saying this. We have the most uninsured in the country. That includes children. We have the highest medical cost upgrade across the country as well. We have the highest maternal mortality rate in the country. And we have one of the highest rates in the world. We have the highest repeat teen pregnancy rate here in Texas. And the most uninsured in Texas happen to be in Dallas County. These are not statistics we should be first in. We must be able to have a discussion about the absolute need for Medicaid expansion in Texas. This is a must for us. And so for me, healthcare will be an absolute priority on the Texas House floor. And understand this, it's not just a priority for progressive Democrats, it's a priority for rural Republicans who have their hospitals closed on a regular basis. This is absolutely a bipartisan issue. If you are in rural Texas right now, you may not be able to find a doctor for 200 miles. That is not healthcare. So this must be a priority. It will be for me. I am a former Medicaid recipient in the state of Texas. As many of you know, I am a former foster care child. And for me, this is very personal. I know what it's like to have health insurance. I know what it's like to not have health insurance. And I want to be an advocate for health care in Texas and health care now.
Mr. Terry, I will repeat the question. What is your top legislative priority and why?
Really, for every legislator who's elected in the state of Texas, education almost has to be the first priority because it's almost half of our state budget. And I think it goes deeper than that. If we think about how our state has been successful over the past 2 decades, the Texas miracle that they call it, it is true that we've had a great business climate, and many of us have benefited from that. But I think that's because we have chronically underinvested in our kids, and that uninvestment has presented itself in both underinvestment in education and healthcare. So my number one priority would be to make sure that we have a pre-K and a 3- and 4-year-old preschool program that allows every child in our state to access early learning and early education so that by the time they get to kindergarten, they have the skills to compete and to be successful in school, and they can be at grade level by third grade. So that's my number one legislative priority. But my second priority, and I want to cite this as well, and I've said this consistently since I entered the race, is Texas has almost 1 million children without health care, without health insurance. As a young dad, my kids had a genetic bone disease, and they were patients at Scottish Rite. And I was struck by the amazing mission of that hospital, that no parent has to worry about expenses for their child's health care. And I thought then, this is the way it ought to be for everyone. I don't think any parent should have to struggle or have to worry about taking care of their kids' medical needs because of cost. And so we as a state need to make sure that we do that. And it's the moral thing to do, but I actually think it's the right thing to do from an investment strategy as well. If your kids are healthy, they can learn. And so those two are coupled, but I also think it pays dividends later in life. If we treat our children and provide good health care when they're young, when they're older, they will be much healthier and save money in the long run. So I think that's the way to bring Republicans on board to support this idea. And my third priority would be to make sure that we have greater transparency and accountability with our outsourcing and our state budget. Texas outsources $250 billion of services to contracts, and we'll talk about that later tonight.
Mr. Ervin, I will repeat the question. What is your top legislative priority and why?
So like the other two, public education and Medicaid expansion have to be at the top of our list. Public education needs to have permanent funding so that we can keep it strong. We need to close those commercial property tax loopholes to make sure that happens. We need to have the state paying for at least 50% of the funding for our public schools. Medicaid expansion, that's good for our business and it's good for our communities. Everybody needs health care. But when you dig into this district, I think that you're going to find that we got a couple of other issues. We need affordable housing. We also have we've just opened the Fannie Harris Youth Center right over here close to us at Fair Park. That is a facility that is going to house homeless DISD students. And we have almost 4,000 of those. That right now is being funded by private partnerships. There's no money from the city, no money from the state, no money from federal sources going into that. And if we want our children to have a chance at life, we got to make sure that they are protected and safe. Kind of look at 1 minute, thanks. So let's also remember that we need to have very strong public services if we're going to have a strong capitalist state. I also attended a seminar recently that talked about, Rob Kaplan with the Federal Reserve talked about that our workforce growth is stagnant. And it's starting to decline because we also need to make sure and realize that we have been running on an immigrant workforce. And so we need to make sure that we as a state maybe become leaders in taking care of immigration in this state and making sure that we have more people coming in to work for in our society.
Question number 2, we will start with you, Mr. Terry. How do you feel that you can represent the diversity that is HD108?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I agree we have a diverse district. The neighborhoods are eclectic. I'm particularly happy to be in Deep Ellum tonight. Unlike Morgan Meyer, I actually came here right out of high school and college, and I've been coming to Deep Ellum ever since. My family and I would frequently visit Eduardo's Acayala, but that became Monica's. Many of you might remember that. So this is a wonderful neighborhood, and it's kind of representative of the diversity of our district. But I would say, if you really think about it, 108 represents the leadership of our city. Most of the political, the business, the nonprofit, the educational leadership of Dallas either lives or works in this district. And the reason I cite that is that we have an amazing collection of intellectual capital. So many wonderful ideas, people from all walks of life who are doing their very best through nonprofit work, through their work in the business community, entrepreneurs, to lead our city forward and hopefully to lead our state forward. So I think the representative of 108 has to harness those great ideas and then take them to Austin and be a leader on issues that are going to involve our growth and our development as a state. So I'm very blessed to run in a district like this with so many amazing people, with the talent, the creativity to make sure that in Austin, we're promoting the very best ideas on how to grow and develop our state. And that's what's motivating to me about running here. I do believe that with the diversity in our district, both culturally and economic, we also have a diversity of people, whether it's our various cultural diversity. I happen to be running as someone who would be the first out, or actually the only out gay man in the Texas legislature. And that to me is a distinction because it says to those kids who are questioning whether our state will embrace them that yes, we value you and you're welcome in our state. And so I believe we can be a symbol from 108 of what is great about Texas.
Mr. Ervin, how do you feel that you can represent the diversity that is HD 108?
First of all, I'd like to point out just how diverse this district is. You know, on the one hand, the average home value is about $550,000. On the other hand, the average household income is less than $100,000. 90% of the students in DISD are eligible for free lunch. So while we do have very strong business leaders in this district, we have a certain segment of the district that is affluent, but we need to make sure that we are building a community voice that includes all. And so I feel like we need to pay attention and make sure that we focus on those who are most vulnerable in our community and make sure that we are building systems that can lift them up so that they can be part of our community. So the best way for me to do that is what I've been doing. I need to go out in every precinct like I have multiple times and have one-on-one conversations so they get to know me and I get to know them so that I can truly represent their voice. That's what, to me, being a legislator will be all about, is being a representative of the voice of the people.
Ms. Cattanach, the question, how do you feel that you can represent the diversity that is HD 108?
Well, I'm so proud to live in a district that has this rich diversity. Not only do we have business leaders, as Mr. Terry has pointed out, not only do we have, homeowners and working folks in this district, as Mr. Ervin has pointed out, we also have minority populations in this district, and it is constantly growing. I myself am the first Latina to ever run for this district. I would be the first Democratic female to ever win for this state house seat. So I think that's important to realize that there is a diversity here that must be truly looked at and saying, where is our state going in the future? We are a majority minority state, and our city is increasingly majority minority. This district is still majority Caucasian, but we have an increasingly diverse population. The largest minority population in this district is Latino, and I'm very proud to be a part of these organizations that have helped support us as well. But I also think when we're talking about diversity, we need to be looking about diversity of experience. When's the last time we sent a teacher to Austin to talk about education policy? Not enough. Not enough times are we sending people with these really diverse experiences as well. And one of the things that has made us so successful through our campaign and through last time is the ability to relate to people and say, hey, I send my kids to public schools. I really care about what happens to them. I pay property taxes on a home that's built in 1928, but I'm taxed for the home that was built in 1998 across the street. And it frustrates me. And I think that's important to realize that when we are looking about that diversity in this district, who actually has the experience, who's actually representing that on a daily basis in their walk and in their talk and in their life, and who will be that voice on the State House floor doing that every single day. I am proud to say that will absolutely be me for this district.
Question number 3, Mr. Ervin. When is local control appropriate over state control, and when is state control appropriate over local control?
That's an interesting question. For the most part, I think local control should be the one that governs most of the time. We passed an earned paid sick leave ordinance here, which I was a part of and testified for. We have non-discrimination ordinances in place, that are both trying to be taken away from us at the state level. Those are the types of things that we need to take care of. I would like to caution everybody that local ordinances can also result in towns that decide that they are going to curtail abortions and be very pro-life. Local ordinances can also include Jim Crow laws that should be put away forever. So we want to make sure that we don't cross a line and go back in that direction. So in general, I would say when we're talking about wages, when we're talking about business, that we can let local communities help set the bar. But there are some big issues that obviously the federal government and the state government are going to have a hand in, just to make sure that we can protect the civil rights that we all enjoy. We need to make sure that our planet is safe, and so that's something that if we're going to transition to green energy, we're going to have help at the federal and state level. So I think that's it.
Ms. Cattanach, question number 3. When is local control appropriate over state control? And when is state control appropriate over local control?
So this is an interesting discussion to be having, because in the state of Texas, we have an issue with local control. We have a governor who often overreaches, and that's so interesting now because it used to be opposite issues. This used to be a really Republican talking point, but now Democrats are talking about, what about our local control? It's not just sanctuary cities for the unborn that local ordinances are being created to do that. They're also creating local ordinances for Second Amendment rights as well. I think it's important to realize that local control matters, and here are the areas where it really matters. With regards to taxation, we have elected officials that we democratically elect to raise property taxes, to lower property taxes, to raise wages, to provide paid sick leave, and we elect these people to do that locally because these are the local issues that matter to the citizens in this city and matter to the employees in this city, for instance. So that's one area I think it's important. I also think it's important that local control needs to be respected with regards to elections. Right now in Houston, the Houston ISD School Board has essentially been taken over by the Texas Education Agency. And many in the Houston area are saying, well, we elect these officials, we go through these elections, and the government comes in and says this is how it's going to be run because it's not efficient with regards to the Texas Education Agency standards. But what about the standards of Houston parents? What about the voters there who put a vote for people they want to represent them? And the other thing I think we need to look at, when the state overreaches, when they want to step in on the height of our trees, which they tried to do, when they want to say, like they did in the city of Denton, when Denton residents did not want fracking within their city limits, and the state government came in and said, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that because we are going to allow it. That is absolutely an overreach of state government, and I think that we need to respect local control. I think we'll be on the defense for local control in this next session, but I want to be assured that we understand that we protect what we actually vote for and support here as a city, and that what our county officials do that we also support in Austin.
Mr. Terry?
So I often say that one of the things that I think unites Republicans and Democrats is that we hate hypocrisy. And there's nothing more hypocritical than Austin politicians who have complained and whined about the federal government for decades, and now they're doing the same thing to us. And it's really simple. The reason they're doing that is our urban areas have turned Democrat, and now they don't like it, so they want to come in and take control. But I think the philosophy of government is best, which is closest to the people, is the right one. There are 3 instances where I think the state can play a role in kind of a supervisor role, and that is ensuring minimum standards of funding on education. So again, the local school boards really dictate how those children are taught. But the state has to be there to make sure that they adhere to minimum standards, and that's an important role. Secondly, our environmental laws are not being enforced today. So all of us have a concern about the environment, but unfortunately our legislature has defunded its enforcement agencies, and we are not enforcing environmental laws. That's clearly a state responsibility, and we're not meeting our obligations there. And third, another area where the state has a responsibility that's not a local responsibility is immigrants that have come to our country. The state has a federal duty to protect the lives of immigrant children, and it's not adhering to that responsibility today. So it needs to step up. But there's so many areas where the state needs to stay out of our business, and in virtually every other way of life, the government closest to us is the one that we want governing our lives. Specifically, as it comes to property tax caps, I've opposed those. The incumbent in this district has, in almost every case, voted against local control. We have to expose that and make sure that that issue comes out. One final note that I'll make is 2 sessions ago, there was an amendment, and it was by Representative Anchia, to allow local governments to control open carry. In other words, if you don't want open carry in your city, Dallas, Highland Park, University Park, you can opt out. Unfortunately, the incumbent in our district voted against that, and that's exactly the kind of overreach that we need to prevent at a state level.
Question number 4, we will start with you, Ms. Cattanach. If everyone will listen to this question, it is long, so I'm not going to repeat it if possible to save time. As a judge, I see the impact of the failure of the last 2 legislative cycles when bail reform was not passed. Lack of bail reform disproportionately impacts the poor, the working class, and people of color. Why do you believe that bail reform has failed to pass in the last 2 legislative cycles? And what will you do about bail reform in Texas if elected? Ms. Cattanach.
So why has bail reform failed, and what I will do to make sure that it actually passes? So one of the reasons that comprehensive bail reform has not passed in the Texas state legislature has a lot to do with who's funding some of these representatives. Some of the biggest donors to campaigns are bail bondsmen, truly. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars donated to representatives, Democrat and Republican, to stop this type of legislation from making it through the committees and making it to the House floor and making it to a floor vote. So I do really think we have to look at that and say, who your representatives are taking money from and accepting. Are they really representing what's best for the constituents, what's best for the state, what's truly best for criminal justice, or are they representing something else? So one of the things I pledge to do is not take or accept money from bail bondsmen. I will not do that. We need comprehensive bail reform. Jails cannot be essential poorhouses, which they've become. You shouldn't stay in jail because you're too poor to get out. Not because of your crime, but because you simply can't pay a fee. And truly, that's what they've become. Over and over again, this disproportionately affects minority populations in particular. And so you see this cycling effect happening over and over and over again in communities of color, and it's not stopping. And it could, with simple legislation that needs to be passed, and it could stop if we had representatives who were truly standing on the values and principles that are going to see this done and not standing on their donors' dollars.
Mr. Terry.
So I agree that the biggest barrier to this kind of change, and it's much more widespread than just this one issue, is the unlimited campaign contributions in our state. And as Ms. Cattanach mentioned, there are thousands of bail bondsmen in the state, and they have disproportionate influence on our system. The issue, though, is broader than that from my perspective in criminal justice. I am deeply troubled by the fact that we have so many for-profit prisons, but we also have so many for-profit companies operating in our correctional system. And to me, this is almost in contradiction of good public policy. So we as a state obviously want fewer people incarcerated. And we've got somewhere around 60,000 nonviolent offenders in our state jails today. The reason I believe that this is a major issue is that we have such an industry in the for-profit prison sector and people who serve that industry, and they can make unlimited contributions in the legislature. And this gets back to a point I made earlier tonight. We have $250 billion of outsourced state services, and there's almost no regulation or oversight of that. The worst example, in my opinion, is this for-profit prison industry and all the ancillary businesses around it. So we need true campaign finance reform in this state. Most of you know that federal candidates are limited to $2,700 contributions per elections. In the state of Texas, there's unlimited contributions. And the incumbent in our district will end up getting $100,000 donations from special interest. He did last time. That's exactly what will happen again. And you've got a toxic combination of for-profit contracts, unlimited contributions, and then a lieutenant governor who is disbanding the legislative budget board, and that's the oversight function of our state. So it's deeply concerning and something that we've got to address.
Mr. Ervin.
So for me, this is going to be short. It comes down to 4 simple points. First, money in politics. I think there's people out there who right now are working hard with the American Promise Movement to support the 28th Amendment to take up money out of politics at all levels. 2, I think it's a little bit more nefarious. There's a big effort to control our lives, to control the vote, and the ultimate answer is to elect more Democrats.
Mr. Terry, the next question starts with you. How do you balance your deeply held personal beliefs if it comes into conflict with the views or beliefs of your constituents?
I think it's a great question. A lot has been made in this campaign about the fact that I was a Republican earlier in life. And like many of us who go through a life-changing event, and that one for me was coming out. And I came out in 2004 over a period of several years. And for most of us, when we come out, it actually allows us to be our authentic self. And it allows us to be who we really are. And so that process for me started in 2004, culminated in having a partner, being a single dad, raising my 2 children, and ultimately becoming a Democrat and re-engaging in the political process. And I'm very proud to be a Democrat today. There are a number of issues where undoubtedly, and I'll say one of them is guns, where my positions are definitely more liberal than that of my constituents. So I might personally favor something that the majority of my constituents wouldn't. So I don't think we can violate our own personal ethics, and I wouldn't. But I also understand that I might be willing to go further on an issue than the Texas legislature. In those cases, I think you do your best to accomplish as much as you can, understanding that you're guided by your own values, but most importantly by those of your district and your constituents. And that's what will always guide me. And I've said many times in this race, we're all running to be the Democratic nominee in 108, but 108 is a diverse district. And it includes tens of thousands of independents and ticket splitters. And in 2018, 12,500 people, Beto won by 12,500 votes, yet we still lost this district. And 3,000 people didn't vote at all. That's the highest of any district in DFW. So 3,000 people just elected to not participate, which is way beyond the norm of all the area districts. What we've got to do is engage those independents, engage those disaffected Republicans, tell them that our values are their values. We do care about the economy. We care about schools. We care about health care. And I think in representing their values, we will win in November.
Mr. Ervin, I will reread the question. How do you balance your deeply held personal beliefs if it comes into conflict with the views or beliefs of your constituents?
So I think, as Shawn said, we all have very strong held beliefs. I'm doing my best to make sure that I get out to all of the parts of the district, to make sure that I understand the beliefs of the district, but more importantly, that they know who I am and that I will stand up and fight the fight for them for the issues that matter the most. I firmly believe that those who are persecuted the most are the ones we need to protect the most. So it's very simple for me. We need to make sure, we haven't really talked about this, I don't know if we're going to have a question. If you're going to be an ally to women, you need to make sure that when we talk about health care, that you plainly say abortion is health care, abortion is your decision, no matter what, no matter when. If you're going to support the LGBTQ community, you stand up and do it. I don't really see very many publicly elected officials at almost any level attend very many of the rallies and the protests that we have across the district for whatever group it is. And I think that's one of the most important things about being an office holder is that you make sure that the voice that elected you is going to see you out there in the public so that they know that you truly are going to speak for them.
Ms. Cattanach, how do you balance your deeply held personal beliefs if it comes into conflict with the views or beliefs of your constituents?
So one of the things I think that is going to be really important as we continue to debate tonight is really centering this conversation on 3 really important things that you need to be looking at each of the candidates about. And that really comes down to this. What is their record? Do you trust them? And where is the change going to be? The easiest way to answer that is to say, I know what my record is. I know where I've been when it comes to common sense gun reform. I know how important of an issue that is for me personally, and I know what it is as an issue for this district. So one of the things, when I'm listening to this conversation and listening to my opponent speak, the question is, who are we really? And really, when we're talking about, I had a Republican voting record in the past, that's not the same as saying you were actually A-rated by the NRA. And now you want to talk about common sense gun reform. These are important things to point out because we have to have someone who we can actually trust to have issues and to have values that we can trust and who has a record of actually standing up for these things. When it comes to things like common sense gun reform, I've been a long-spoken advocate of removing campus carry on campuses. I've worked with organizations like Moms Demand. I am a former patient of Planned Parenthood. I am proud to stand up for reproductive rights of women. I never supported a constitutional ban on abortion. These are things you need to understand. We need to have a real conversation about what are the real values you're really representing, what your real record is on this, and what is going to be the change. Because having a conversation in this room tonight and saying one thing to this room, another thing to donors, and doing something totally different in Austin is exactly what we've had for years. Stand on your record. Trust who you elect. That's how we get real change in Austin.
So, Judge Glenn, do we get a chance to respond to that?
No.
Okay. We'll just take another question to it.
I get lots of those questions in court, too. Question number 6, and I believe we were with Mr. Ervin. If you can pass one piece of legislation in Texas regarding guns other than background checks, what would it be?
Interesting. I kind of believe in the Second Amendment, but I definitely don't believe in the Second Amendment that's been bought and paid for by the NRA. There was a point. We all talk about banning assault rifles, but most of gun deaths come from handguns. There was a point in our time where handguns were illegal to carry. I think we need to look at that. If I've got my wish and can do that, I think I would head that direction.
Ms. Cattanach, if you can pass one piece of legislation in Texas regarding guns other than background checks, what would it be?
So I really think we need to look at the state's red flag laws, and I want to say this with this in mind and with this history in mind. I have such a passion for protecting the students in my classroom because my campus was the site of a deadly school shooting. And you should never watch TV and hear your colleagues locked and barricaded in a classroom like I have to do. You should never have to do active shooter drills every single semester, which is what I have to do. My pre-K kiddo goes through active shooter drills. This is the state that we are living in. And it's not a state of being I want to be living in, because it is frightening to hear what these kinds of classroom training sessions are like for students. They are afraid. I think we need to, though, look at legislation, particularly with regard to red flag laws, and keep this in mind. In 2014, the Wisconsin State Legislature passed red flag laws with a Republican legislature. There is no reason we can't do this in Texas if we have the right people on the House floor talking about these issues and talking about the importance of what this will mean, not only for the safety of people in our district, but for the safety of law enforcement as well. These red flag laws let us know who is a possible offender. They often are used in domestic violence cases. They can be passed if we're willing to do it, and I am.
Mr. Terry, if you can pass one piece of legislation in Texas regarding guns other than background checks, what would it be?
I agree with Joanna on the red flag laws, but I would go one step further. I have a deep concern, and it certainly is a personal one for me, that we allow young boys under the age of 21 to access guns. And what I would say is that most mental health professionals know that mental illness presents itself in men in their late teenage years and early 20s. And so I think restricting their right to a firearm during that period, unless they've served in the military, is something that a lot of us could get behind and support. And it is a personal issue for me. As some of you know, when my daughter was a student at UC Santa Barbara, her sorority was under assault and was attacked by a deranged young boy who couldn't get a date with one of those sorority sisters. And 2 of her sisters were murdered on the lawn of that house. And so I do have deeply held feelings about this. And to go back to what Ms. Cattanach said, yes, I had an A rating from the NRA in 1998. But as I just stated, a lot in my life has changed since 1998. Most of us, when we come out because we're trying to live our authentic self. And we're trying to be ourselves, and we're trying to embrace our own passions and convictions. In 2011, I actually gave money to Giffords. So this issue has been something that was important before my daughter's school was under attack. And I've been consistent in support of gun reform legislation ever since then. So I do have a deep and strong desire to protect our children. And I think by raising that age from 18 to 21, not only will it help in the mass shooting scenario, but the largest cause of gun deaths in our country is suicide. And many of those suicides are young men. So if we can raise that age to 21, I think it will save a lot of lives, both in nefarious activities and then self-inflicted harm.
The next question, I believe, starts with Ms. Cattanach. For the sake of the forum, let's assume that there is a runoff and you do not make the cut. Will you throw your support behind either of the 2 remaining candidates? If so, why? If not, why not?
Thank you for the question. We had this question last cycle as well, and I will always say the same thing each time. It is so important for Democrats to support each other, and I will support the nominee in the 3 ways that matter most, and that is money, manpower, and messaging. Really, this district is so hard to walk. You need an army of people to do that. You need financial support. You need the right message at the door, and I pledge to do that as I have with municipal candidates, as I have with slate candidates, and as I will continue to do so in the future. And frankly, I think that should be expected of any Democrat here.
Mr. Terry, I will reread the question. For the sake of the forum, let's assume that there is a runoff and you do not make the cut. Will you throw your support behind either of the 2 remaining candidates? If so, why? If not, why not?
I don't want to state who I might support because we're not there and we haven't crossed that path. What I will state is I will absolutely support our nominee, but I'd go a step further and say I will support nominees across our state to flip the Texas House. Winning these 9 seats is essential. This is the 2nd most Democratic district in Texas, not represented by a Democrat. So this is a district that we should already have a Democrat in office today, and we need to do everything possible to make sure that we flip it. But there are a whole lot of other districts as well that we need to prioritize. So I will support our nominee vigorously, but I will also support nominees across the state.
Mr. Ervin.
So I think the question is, which one would I support in the runoff? And I would support neither. I'd let them let the voters of the district support that. But I, of course, would support whoever is the ultimate nominee in November so that we can make sure that we flip this seat and get rid of Morgan Meyer. I will say on the gun question, I thought of that more as a hypothetical of what I would like to happen. I think if I were to answer that again, I would think that we need maybe gun licensing. We have licenses for almost everything else in our state. Why not have a license for guns so that we could have more revenue coming into the state?
Mr. Terry, the next question starts with you. Tell us about your campaign staffers and what your choices of campaign staff reflects about you, your decision-making, and your values.
Well, first of all, I'm enormously proud of our team. Our campaign manager, Sarah Slayman, actually led Julie Johnson's campaign and helped flip that seat. So I was a supporter of Julie. She did a phenomenal job in flipping a district that looks a lot like this one. was able to do it, and Sarah led that effort, so I'm really proud of her. I've also got 2 other younger women with my campaign, Libby and Susan, who are amazing, who are a great representative of 108. Both of them are incredibly hard workers, passionate about all the issues that we've talked about tonight, and great at recruiting volunteers and meeting with people door to door. I would just expand it to say one other thing. We have an amazing support network. We've raised more money than anyone in this race, but that's because we have support from all over the district. We have over 400 individual donors to date. I'm really proud of the diverse support that we have across the district, and my team is a reflection of that, and they've enabled that to happen. So I'm extremely proud of that team. I'm thrilled to have them with us. And I guess it is an interesting point to note that I have a team comprised of 3 women.
Mr. Ervin, tell us about your campaign staffers and what your choices of staff reflects about you, your decision-making, and your values.
So this is a great question for me. We have a grassroots team. I have one staffer, Hosanna Imro. She was the one of the field directors for Colin Allred's campaign. And so since our focus is grassroots, that seemed like a logical place to find someone to help run this campaign. What we do also have is a strong group of volunteers that helped elect a number of officials in the 2018 cycle. It was one of the reasons that I decided to go forward with this candidacy. When we had 40 to 50 people of the ones who were walking for Colin Allred, walking for Nathan Johnson, Beto O'Rourke, and one of my opponents, and they all came over to support our campaign. For us, grassroots is not just a campaign strategy. It's, to me, the only way you can truly get out there and find out what the voice of the people is. And that's what we're all about, is the voice of the people.
Ms. Cattanach, tell us about your campaign staffers and what your choices of staff reflects about you, your decision-making, and your values.
So I, too, have a 3-woman shop. I have the amazing Susie McMinn, who is in the back of the room, cheering us on. Susie, as many of you know, has been a field organizer, has been a field director, is a superwoman for Democratic candidates, including helping to lead the effort to get State Senator Nathan Johnson elected. And that is why we chose to have her on our staff, because I watched that woman work and work and work, and I thought, if we're going to flip this state house seat, we're going to need some hardworking women to do it, and she was one of them. So thank you, Susie, so much. The other one is Priscilla Cisneros. She is working with finance for us this time. She's an amazing young woman who helps me translate better in Spanish sometimes when I need a little bit of help. She has also worked on multiple campaigns as well, and I'm also working with the Jeff Dalton Group, as many of you know. He helps run the coordinated campaign here. He helped get John Crusoe elected as our district attorney. He helped get the most Democratic gains in Dallas County, and he has done so for years. So I looked at this race and I said, we have to go a half inch more. We have the most individual donors at 500. We have the lowest average of donors at 111. 111 is our average donation in this district. We also have the highest percentage of in-district donors. That means the best support that we have are the people who actually want to vote in this district, who actually live in this district. Every single Democratic club in this district has supported this campaign. Every one of them, including the labor unions. I think it's important to also note that on Saturday, we will have a labor orientation. So our campaign has chosen to become unionized, and we will begin that orientation this weekend. If you're going to back labor, you need to be a campaign that does it. We are the first State House campaign this election cycle to become unionized, and I'm proud to say so.
Mr. Ervin, this question goes to you. This is a long question, lady and gentlemen. This question arises from my experience as candidate running all over the state of Texas. A candidate picks the endorsements they choose to go after. They pick that for various reasons. Please tell us about an endorsement you sought and did not receive. What did you learn from that instance? If you have not sought any endorsements, please explain why. And if you have any time remaining, please feel free to list the endorsements you have received for 2020.
So I think if we want to start with what endorsement did I seek and did not receive, it would have to be the AFL-CIO. I feel like our campaign is all about working families. It's all about making sure that we are the voice of the most vulnerable in this community. And so I felt like that was one that should have gone our way because we very clearly, I think, are out in the district in the places that many candidates don't go. We did receive the endorsement from JOLT, which is a strong grassroots organization statewide, Latino group. So since we have such a large Latino population in this district, that was one that I sought and won. I could name I think now 22 precinct chairs from all over the county that have endorsed me, but that would take a while. I think the most important endorsement we have is the people themselves that we have when we canvass out in the district. And that is the one that ultimately means the most to any candidate, is making sure that you're getting the endorsements of the voters that are going to, that you're going to represent down in the legislature.
Ms. Cattanach, do you want me to reread?
I think I got it.
Let me reread it for you. This question arises from my experience as a candidate running all over the state of Texas. A candidate picks the endorsements they choose to go after. They pick that for various reasons. Please tell us about an endorsement you sought and did not receive. What did you learn from that instance? If you have not sought any endorsements, please explain why. And if you have any time remaining, please feel free to list the endorsements you have received for 2020.
So this is interesting because the did not receive endorsements sometimes has to do with the fact that the organization feels that the race is not worth the investment yet, or that the state of Texas is not worth the investment yet. So I did seek the endorsement from Emily's list. I received the endorsement last cycle. I sought it again early. I am the only woman in this race, so naturally that would be a natural decision for me. But they have not chosen to endorse, so I have not gotten the endorsement yet, and they have not chosen to do so because they're still looking at the Texas state legislature and saying, can this state really flip? And they're on the fence about that. And that frustrates me because I truly think that it's possible. It's 9 seats away. I think that we can do this. So we are still waiting for that. And that is often, for me, some of the most frustrating things, to know that without some national investment, it's going to be harder for us. And I want those groups and those organizations that are sort of sitting and waiting, is Texas ready? Is Texas ready? Is this promise of Texas really going to come true? Because we've been saying it for 20 years, and they get tired of hearing it, folks. But that's one of the organizations that I really think needs to have some pressure put on them and say, you have to invest in women in this state. They can do it. Trust them. So that's one of the organizations that I'm still waiting to hear back from. The rest of the organizations that we have been endorsed by is, of course, the AFL-CIO and the local subsidiary chapters. Our local unions as well are under that umbrella. The Preston Hollow Democrats, the North Texas Asian Democrats, 2 different Tejano groups. Stonewall Democrats. Thank you, Stonewall. Certified Progressive. There are multiple other organizations as well. These endorsements are coming in at the same time. So I'm really proud of those endorsements that we have. Former State Representative Harriet Earhart is a good friend, is a mentor to me. She knows what it's like to be on that House floor. She has helped guide me through a lot of this, helped me make the decision to run again, to say keep at it, keep working. That's what matters. And that's an endorsement I'm proud of.
Mr. Terry?
So I was actually the first candidate in the country in a legislative race in 2020 endorsed by the Victory Fund, and I took great pride in that. They've now elevated my race to one of the top 10 in the country as what they call a spotlight race. But I will admit, coming off the heels of that endorsement, I lobbied the board at Equality Texas, which is the state's largest lobbying organization for the LGBTQ community. And although most of that board supports me and has donated to my campaign, they ultimately elected to sit out and have chosen not to endorse. And the reason for that is they view all 3 of us as good on those issues, and I agree with that. And they thought, if we alienate 1 member by endorsing one of you, that was 1 member too many. And interestingly enough, I think that's the same reason Planned Parenthood has chosen to stay out of this race and not make an endorsement. I think they view us as all good on that same issue, so they've elected not to make an endorsement in this primary. I will say that I'm extremely proud to have the endorsements of former mayors Ron Kirk and Mike Rawlings, who understand how important this district is in Austin. And I've got the endorsement of local elected officials, including Chad West, Ben Mackey, who's on the DISD school board, Congressman Mark Vesey, and then my friend, U.S. Senator Kirsten Sinema.
Ladies and gentlemen, give your three candidates a round of applause. Before closing, we do have a time for Q&A. We are going to take a little break so that the candidates, if they need to, may run to the restroom, stretch their legs, and grab a drink of water. If you have not done a question and you want to, please go and make sure you find the forms, write a question out. I'll be looking through them, and we will go into that next phase. Y'all ready?
Tell them it's 1 minute now.
All right. That doesn't sound enthusiastic. Y'all ready? Those are my Democrats. Ms. Cattanach, we're going to start with you. Do you support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United? Do you have any concerns about it?
I support a constitutional amendment to do that. I do have a concern as a state representative. I would have not a lot of ability to do anything about that, but as Texas seems to be a free-for-all for no kind of campaign finance reform, I think it's important that we do something, because truly the ability to give endlessly to campaigns is why we have such disparity in the state house, why grassroots campaigns really have to dial and call day after day for small dollar donations, and we can look to opponents who have their coffers filled to the tunes of tens of $20,000 of $25,000 contributions over and over and over again. And then when you look at legislation that comes out of these legislatures, whether it's state or federal, and you say, how would this pass? Look who's on their donor list. And I truly say that, look who is on their donor lists and see where the representation really happens.
Mr. Terry, do you support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United? Do you have any concerns about it?
I have no concerns about overturning it. I think it's been the biggest disaster for our democracy since it was passed. So I absolutely want it overturned. And I think I've mentioned several times tonight, the lack of any limits on campaign contributions in Texas is appalling. It's contributed to a government that doesn't represent all of us. I'm deeply concerned about it, would do anything within my power to limit campaign contributions in this state. Having said all that, the playing field right now is that we're operating in that system. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we've raised as much money as we have. And I think that's what's required to flip this district, because we know Morgan will be funded. You know, in the last cycle, and I mentioned Sarah's role with Julie Johnson. Julie Johnson flipped a district that looks a lot like this because she raised over $1 million. Matt Rinaldi actually outspent her, but she had enough to compete. We did not have the resources to compete here. That's why we lost it last time. We can't make that mistake again. So until we have campaign finance reform, we've got to play within the system that is currently constructed, but I would love to change it.
Mr. Ervin, do you support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United? Do you have any concerns about it?
I have no concerns, and I am supporting it. I have been working with American Promise to help them in their efforts to overturn Citizens United. We are trying to build a campaign that will be ultimately the model for how you win a state house race here, and that is with volunteers and the right amount of money, not big amounts of money. So we have not focused on raising money. You may not believe that, but I probably do less call time than any candidate in this state. I spend my time out on the doors because I think that we need to make sure that we represent the people, and the best way to do that is actually to be out there talking to them.
Mr. Terry, the next question starts with you. What issues will you support that will appeal to constituents with disabilities other than general health care legislation?
So one of the areas where I think our state has really failed us has been in the issue of mental health. Over 2/3 of our mental health dollars go into the prison system, and that seems a little too after the fact from my perspective. So I think improving our state's care for those who have mental illness is an incredibly important advancement we need to make, and one that I'm committed to in the legislature. We have, unfortunately, created mental health facilities that are run by private companies, again, where there's been problems. I actually met someone knocking on doors who is in her mid-70s. Her daughter was in one of those facilities and was abused. So it is something that I know many people across our state deal with. It's common in almost every family to experience mental health issues amongst our family members. And we as a state have been really absent on this issue. And so I would work with as many allies as I can find to make sure that we care for those with mental illness in a much more thoughtful and effective manner.
Mr. Ervin, what issues will you support that will appeal to constituents with disabilities other than general health care legislation?
I want to make sure that we work together as Democrats, hopefully in a Democratic majority, to make sure that one of the priorities of the budget is to support those with mental disabilities. I think it's very clear when you look at a budget where your priorities are, and right now they are not in that direction. There are caseworkers, not enough caseworkers that are working on in the facilities. There are so many different areas where the state has decided that that is not a priority, and I would support any issues or any funding for any of the issues that are before the state.
Ms. Cattanach, what issues will you support that will appeal to constituents with disabilities other than general health care legislation?
I agree that we need to look at mental health facilities in particular and dealing with that population. If you are having a mental health care crisis, if you have someone with a mental disability in this district, you'd have a hard time finding a facility that would be able to even house you. But I really want us to look at and focus on equitable access for students with disabilities in our public schools, because truly is real inequality there. As some of you know, my son is a special education student. I have a heart for kiddos. I have been through many an ARD meeting. And I look at the facilities that he is in. He is in a East Dallas elementary school that was built in the late 1920s. And that's the facilities at which they're operating. And we have very young children who are PPCD in this school facility, and we're having to accommodate as we go. And this is a good location for kiddos. I think that's where we really need to be focusing on, and I want to be able to access and advocate for that in the state legislature.
Mr. Ervin, the next question starts with you. What law or laws passed in the last session would you have wanted to sponsor? What law passed last session that you would have fought with everything to block?
So there was a big fight to overturn or to make sure the Born Alive bill was not passed. I know in a very early forum we were asked that question, how would we have handled that bill? I was the only one that said I would have voted no. I think that when you are going to stand as an ally with a group, you make sure that you're going to vote the way your allies want you to vote. As far as what bill would I have liked to have been a part of, ultimately, HB3, the school reform bill, was a strong bill. It's not fully funded. As I've said before, we need to close the commercial property tax loopholes and provide permanent funding for that bill and expand it. I've got some other ideas on how to improve funding and infrastructure development for public schools. And I think we need a cost of living adjustments to take into account that the urban schools have a much higher cost of living and should get an adjustment to the Robin Hood allotment.
Ms. Cattanach, what law or laws passed in the last session that you would have wanted to sponsor? What law passed last session that you would have fought with everything to block?
So I definitely would have fought to block the tax cap property tax bill SB2 that was essentially passed in in the legislature and was considered sort of property tax relief for all of us, but for cities, this sort of cap funding really hinders a city's ability to raise the proper funds that are needed to fully keep the city funded. It's one that the city of Dallas fought against, but it was ultimately successful in the state house. And I would have fought to block that because I think that's important that we stop that type of legislation. I think legislation that passed last cycle, I think that it's important that I would have proud to have sponsored on top of that, was really legislation that Victoria Niave helped me author as well, and that is continued funding of making sure the backlog of rape kits are fully funded, and that the women who have to wait for the months and months and months to see that these kits get finally passed are actually funded. So I would have been proud to sponsor that type of legislation as well.
Mr. Terry, what law or laws passed in last session would you have wanted to sponsor? What law passed last session that you would have fought with everything to block?
I would love to have been a participant in HB3 and pushed for a larger expansion of early learning. As I've said several times, that's a priority for me, and it will be in the legislature if I'm elected. So I'd love to see broader access and greater emphasis put on children who are in three-year-old pre-K and children that currently are served by the Texas Workforce Commission. I would have fought to, unlike the incumbent in our district, I would have fought with everything I could to oppose the bill that allowed guns to be brought onto school property. So as many people know, prior to Labor Day, it was against the law to bring a gun into any school parking lot or campus. It is now legal for really any of us to carry a weapon onto a school parking lot next to playgrounds and endanger the lives of our children. This is not only irresponsible, it's really repugnant to many of those moms and dads who have those children at those schools. So I think it was a horrible bill, and I would have opposed it.
Ms. Cattanach, how will the elimination of straight party voting impact your approach to the general election?
So this is an important question because it's what we're going to be facing in November, and it is crucial that any candidate have name recognition in this district. While it is true that we were not successful in flipping State House District 108 and we lost by 220 votes in a recount, I earned the most votes of any contested race in the entire county. I want you to keep that in mind. 38,000 people saw my name on a ballot in the general election. Several more thousand saw my name on a ballot in the primary election. Now we are approaching the third round of election and voting. So over and over again, as voters go into the voting booth, whose name are they going to remember? Mine is literally 15 letters long. Many of you have driven through the areas of East Dallas, have noticed our signs. They're huge because my name has to fit on something that big. Name ID will be crucial in this race. Letting people know not only how do they spell your name, but what do you stand for? Where is your history with this district? Knowing that we have that sort of strength is something that I think we can stand on strongly.
Mr. Terry, how will the elimination of straight party voting impact your approach to the general election?
I think it means that we have to work extra hard to make sure that people vote for us. And as I mentioned earlier, this district had the highest number and highest percentage by twice, 2x, of any other district in North Texas of people who elected not to vote in their House district races. And I would say as far as the name ID, John Turner and Julie Johnson and Retta Bowers and others were able to flip those districts having not run before. So I don't think running in a prior election has really much of anything to do with flipping it the next year. What we saw is that those well-funded, organized, grassroots motivated candidates were able to flip districts. And in John Turner's case, that district actually voted at a lower Democratic margin than this one. So I'm not sure that name ID carried through to November. And I would really question if we have the resources to, if Ms. Cattanach is the nominee, to make sure that we win in November. What I believe we've got to do is marshal not only a field team, but the resources to draw a sharp contrast between the negative policies that Morgan Myers supports and what we as Democrats represent. And that is going to take a lot of dollars, and I'm the only one who's demonstrated the ability to raise those to date.
Mr. Ervin, the question, how will the elimination of straight party voting impact your approach to the general election?
The only impact it's had is that we focus on grassroots and a field team. Talking about name recognition, of the thousands of conversations I've had out there at the doors, I can say most people think that I'm running by myself. And we're mostly knocking on Democratic primary voters in 2016 and 2018. They are vaguely aware that someone else may have run, but for the most part, I'm the only one that they see, and they're the ones that are supporting me. This is all about grassroots for Democrats to win. There's no way that we're going to have more money than the Republican in November. So if you don't have a strong grassroots team, you're going to be at a disadvantage when you're trying to win this seat. And that's what we have, is a very strong grassroots team.
Mr. Terry, you start the next question. Do you support high-density housing?
I do, but what I would like to say, I'm sensitive to the issue that we've discussed tonight in terms of regentrification. And I think we've got to have a thoughtful approach to development. I do realize zoning issues are local and municipal issues, but I do think the state can enable laws that allow for mixed-use developments so that we have a combination of low-income housing with other developments. So those are high density, generally speaking. And I do support those where we're strategic about investing dollars in low-income housing grants and using low-income tax credits for those purposes. I am concerned about people who are being displaced. I think it's really important to look at historic preservation districts, and broadly applying those throughout the district makes no sense. I think we've got to be strategic and targeted about protecting those neighborhoods where we have a higher concentration of lower-income residents, protect those with historic preservation districts, and thereby preserving their homes and making sure that high-density housing doesn't displace them.
Mr. Ervin, do you support high-density housing?
With reservations. I think before we start building more high-density housing facilities, we need to address the infrastructure around them to make sure that we actually have public transportation so that we don't just all of a sudden have more carbon emissions going to and from one particular place. We have to definitely make sure that we have affordable housing units within high-density units, and I'm not just talking about a cursory 10 or 20%. We need to have as many housing units in those high-density facilities as they are replacing, if they're replacing affordable housing before they build the facility. We have got to make sure that people who work for a living can work close to where they work. Everybody that's a firefighter, a police officer, a teacher does not need to be 20, 30, an hour away from where they work. So somehow we're going to have to make this work so that we are stronger as a community.
Ms. Cattanach, do you support high-density housing?
Test. Here we go. I do, and I think this is an example of this type of high-density housing that this district is going to inevitably be seeing over and over again. What I do want to say in that is that high-density housing also has to come with another conversation, and that is affordable housing, that is gentrification laws, and that is multi-generational housing. I want us to see us look at these real issues. If we're going to build high-rises, if we're going to look at a population that is continuously moving into House District 108, and it is, we need to look at what these populations are. It's not just millennial. It is young family. It is empty nesters that are returning into the uptown area, into the downtown area. And so we have a real need for multi-generational housing. And I think that's a discussion that we need to be having as well with this.
This is the last question before closing. Mr. Ervin, can you be more specific about your plans to improve public education statewide?
One thing that I would like to see is for Texas to be a leader in green energy. And I think the place to start is by making sure that high school facilities across the state are net zero energy facilities. So I'd like to make sure that we have funds to help with the infrastructure. Most of our property tax dollars come back to help with operations, but DISD has a $25 million a year electricity bill. Highland Park is $1 million a year. You dig those facts out by actually looking at their budgets. And so that's someplace where we could not only make this county greener, this state greener, but we're going to put more dollars back into teacher salaries and the employee salaries in the school districts. And I think that's something that everyone in the state, no matter what side of the aisle, could look at and say, yeah, that's a good idea.
Ms. Cattanach, can you be more specific about your plans to improve public education statewide?
So I think we really have to look at all the things that are involved when we're talking about public education. It's not just increasing the amount of money that's going to public schools. It's securing teacher pensions. It's lowering teacher health care costs. It's looking at the formulas that we are needed to adjust so that school funding is funded equitably. HB3 did a very small thing for Texas. It moved us from 45th in national funding to 43rd. Texas needs to aim to stay at 50% state funding. We must invest in the human capital in classrooms. And I think that it's important to note that we must invest in representatives who have an understanding of the public education system. We need to invest in a teacher who's been in these kinds of classrooms and a parent who sat through these PTA meetings and someone who supports our public schools on every step out of the way, has not supported private school vouchers, has not taken money from charter affiliates. And I think that's something that is part of this discussion in supporting real public school funding in Texas.
Mr. Terry, can you be more specific about your plans to improve public education statewide?
So I've talked a lot about early learning, but what I'd like to talk about for the next minute is teacher salaries. If you look at educational outcomes across the world, countries who pay their teachers better have better outcomes. So I think the primary way we can improve our metrics in terms of educational outcomes is attract our best and brightest to teaching. And to do that, we're going to have to substantially raise teacher salaries and compensation. So it's a whole package if you look at benefits and retirement as well as the salary they get through teaching. So that would be my emphasis in the legislature, is expanding and increasing the dollars available to every district for funding its staff and teachers and counselors, and making sure that instead of ranking 40-something in every category, which we do today, we aspire to be in the 20s over the next decade. And that's a reasonable aspiration. It'll be very difficult to get there, but we can at least control teacher salaries by funding them at a level that's not only competitive nationally, but attracting our best and brightest kids to that profession.
Thank you, candidates. You will have closing arguments, and I believe 1 minute, Ian? 1 minute, and I believe we were going to start in the opposite order of the intros, which means, Mr. Ervin, you are first.
First of all, I want to thank everybody again for coming out here tonight. This is obviously a very important election. For now, 2 elections in a row, this has been the most important election of our lifetime, and once again, I think it's true. For all of you who are out there advocating for change in this state, I think this is something that we're going to be doing probably for the rest of our lives. No matter who wins this election, we need to make sure that we are always fighting for positive change. We've been working really hard to make sure that we hear the voice of this district. The only way to do that, in my opinion, is to make sure we get out there and talk to as many people as possible as the candidate. That's what we've been doing. I've got the energy, I've got the education, I've got the life and the work experience to unite the voters on both sides of 75 and downtown to make sure that we win in November. We've got the infrastructure in place to win in November. So I'm hoping that you'll come join our team and make sure that we take our vision and our voice down to Austin so we can make a difference. Thank you.
Mr. Terry.
So I just want to mention a little bit about myself, because I know that's a lot of our point tonight. I started a small business with 3 people in 2001, and since that time have grown it and employed hundreds of people and have lived progressive values every day. Joanna asked about our values. My business values, I think, are consistent with those of the Democratic Party, and that from the day we started our firm, we paid 100% of everyone's health insurance. We've matched 100% of everyone's retirement. We provided paternity and maternity leave. And most importantly, and what I take the most pride in, is in 2008 and 2009, when we were going through the greatest recession of our lifetimes, our firm, unlike every other firm in our industry, didn't lay off a single person. The reason we were able to do that is I went without taking compensation for 2 years. I always put my employees first. I think those are democratic values. That's exactly the mindset and the capability I'll bring to Austin. How do we create jobs? How do we build a strong economy for better schools and wider access to healthcare? But do that while living democratic values, and I've lived those every day for 18 years as a business owner, and I'll do that in Austin.
Ms. Cattanach.
Well, let me reiterate and say again, thank you all so much for being here. It means so much to all of us to have your support. This is a long road ahead of us, and it's so exciting to see a room full of people. I think that the most important thing, and I will come back to this every single time, is looking at what is your record, who do you trust, where is the change? And I will tell you this, and I will promise you this. My record stands for itself, and I have been a committed parent in this community and a committed member of this community. I'm someone who you can trust to hold these democratic values, and we absolutely want change in the Texas State Legislature. I am a former foster care child from Blum, Texas. I will be the first Democratic woman elected to this seat. I will be the first Latina elected to this seat. When we are talking about change, what does that change really look like? What do you trust? What is her record? And her record stands for itself. I will proudly represent this district. I will proudly stand on those values. They have never changed. And I trust, put your trust in me, and I put my trust in you when it comes to the polls in March. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more round for your candidates.
And one more round for our judge, Tina U. Clinton. And I hope that come November, we'll be able to call her Justice Tina U. Clinton.
I also for Ian Saint.
Oh, thank you.
Good job, Ian.
I also want to make sure to thank Beto O'Rourke, who did take the time to address our audience tonight, despite being so busy down in Fort Bend. And I look forward to hearing more from him as we work to flip this seat. I also want to thank Bianca in the middle over there, who's working on voter registrations. Very important. Not just voter registration for first time, but also if your address has changed, if you have any questions whatsoever, make sure to stop by there. I really want to thank the feds, the women leading the feds, because they have been such an invaluable help. There are so many moving parts to putting this on, and their outreach is incredible, and I just adore them. And lastly, I want to thank the venue, Deep Ellum Art Company, because without a roof over our heads, we would not be able to put on this event. And they have been great on the organization front, the production front, and we want to support our small businesses. So I encourage you to spend more money at the bar. They're going to stay open, and to buy merch and to buy art and mingle. So, and thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. When I hosted the 108 primary debate 2 years ago, it was just an offhanded comment of frustration about the lack of representation and engagement in this district, and it led to that, which led to this, which has been tremendous. So just speaks to how getting involved can go a long way. So thank you very much. Have a good night, and we'll see you in March. Earlier than that because of early voting. Yes.